we have Amanda Rose, who is the agri-food systems lead at RTI International. She is a seasoned agri-food systems practitioner and participatory engagement expert. She helps philanthropic donors, collaborative networks, and other partners develop holistic agricultural innovation strategies and adaptively manage programming to improve outcomes for farmers and rural communities. Next page, sorry, almost done. It's good, it's long, but it's good. Amanda is passionate about people, places, and work of agriculture, informed by her experience growing up in a farming family in eastern North Carolina. Miss Amanda, the stage is yours.
Hi, everyone. Great to be with you this evening. Thank you for having me here. Like Will said, I'm Amanda Rose. I'm an agri-food systems lead with RTI. RTI is a nonprofit research institute based just around the corner, and we're on a mission to improve the human condition by putting knowledge into practice. And here we go. One of the reasons I really enjoy the AgTech community, it's a really big tent. So you've got plant scientists, you've got engineers, data scientists, you've got farmers putting AgTech to work, you've got supply chain experts, lots of creative energy being applied in the AgTech space today. You've also got room for folks like me. So I'm a systems practitioner. I think about the agricultural system kind of holistically in a really zoomed out way. So one of the things I think about a lot is like, how are different parts of the agri-food system interacting? How are they connecting? Like, how are policy and regulatory changes in one area going back and flowing back to the farm, consumer preferences shifts, et cetera? And also, where and how is AgTech entering the system? How is it helping to create change today? And how is it starting to influence what our future agri-food system is going to look like in the future? One of the more complex and fascinating kind of intersection points within the agri-food system, at least in my opinion, is around AgTech adoption. So just to kind of level set, when I talk about tech adoption, technology adoption, I think this definition from Everett Rogers is helpful. He talks about the process by which individuals, organizations, and societies accept and integrate new technology into their regular activities and operations. So if we think about AgTech adoption, that's really how farmers and others integrate and routinize their technology and their business practice for improved outcomes on the farm and beyond. Now, the reality is we have a pretty mixed record when it comes to AgTech adoption. So this is just a point-in-time kind of picture from the USDA that says across different types of AgTech options and as applied in different types of farm environments, we have either really high adoption rates, like with yield monitors, yield maps, soil maps, guidance, auto steering for particular types of farms, typically large farms. And then it's relatively spotty in other places, especially for small farms. And of course, some of those AgTech options on the right are newer, so it makes sense that they're just starting to come up the AgTech adoption curve. One of the things we know about AgTech adoption, it's not just about one thing. There's not one determinant. There are many variables that come into play when kind of influencing whether a farmer adopts a new technology or not. And so, understanding that kind of mixed history, I've observed and others have observed a shift in the AgTech community and saying, look, we've got to get much more farmer-centric in our approach to AgTech development. We have to really better understand farmer needs and realities in order to really bring solutions that make sense for them in their business environment. And the point I would like to make in terms of bringing that holistic, that wide lens view on AgTech is that we have to remember, farmers don't operate in a vacuum. They operate in a really complex market environment in which they have themselves a lot of different customers. Those customers, those downstream actors, such as traders, food and bev companies, et cetera, they have their own preferences, their own willingness to pay, et cetera, that then influence whether these adoption choices make sense for farmers or not. And so there's this kind of looming question out there, return on investment for these adoption choices. Farmers are asking, will the market reward my change? And really importantly, when it comes to innovation, will the market sustain the change if I make it today? One of the images that really brings this home, for me at least, is the US food dollar. This is work from the USDA, Economic Research Service, that breaks down for $1 of food expenditure spent in the US on food grown here and manufactured here, where does it go in the food supply chain? What's really fascinating, at least to me in this visual, is that farm production is about 7.9 cents on every dollar. All that other economic activity is happening off the farm. And so think about that in terms of influence over the business choices that farmers are making. And so the question is, well, how do we ensure that AgTech becomes that set of tools that enable farmers to readily and competitively work within that complex market environment? And I think there are a couple of things that we can really bring out, make more in focus for AgTech development, and maybe not just at the individual company level, but as a sector, working collaboratively together with companies and farmers to think more about interoperability and flexibility of these products, these services. How do they work together? How do they build towards these integrated AgTech bundles that really work for individual farmers, that those market contexts and realities they're working in are so incredibly diverse? So how do we better equip them with tools that they can mix and match and they can bundle in unique ways? How do we experiment and test those bundles for them so all of that burden isn't on the individual farmer to figure that out for themselves? I think there's also an opportunity to think more critically and creatively about the business models and the innovation we're doing in business models that are then enabled by technology, but not necessarily driven by technology. In that way, technology becomes an enabler of market opportunity. One of the things I'm excited about, particularly for North Carolina, and in an environment where we grow more than 80 crops and we have really diverse farms, is that North Carolina, along with its innovation prowess, has an opportunity to be an experimentation hub for those integrated AgTech bundles and those new business models that work for small farmers. And as just a teaser, in order to kind of paint that picture more clearly, colleagues and I at RTI have been working on a study to really assess opportunities and assets for North Carolina's AgTech innovation ecosystem. It's going to be released publicly in June. It's along with Dr. Goins and others who are part of an NSF-funded CROPS initiative. CROPS stands for Climate Responsive Opportunities in Plant Science. And so we'll be excited to share this study in just a few weeks and hopefully paint a picture for more opportunities for this type of work in North Carolina. So thank you.
Questions? She's coming. She's right.
So one of the graphs you mentioned, you have shown, it has the drones as one of the AgTech. Why that is the usage of drones is so low? Because that's the primary mechanism to capture the data and analyze and apply AI for a lot of use cases in agri-tech. Why the usage is so low in the farming industry?
Well, as I mentioned previously, there are many factors that go into those decisions. I think there's a reality of time in terms of folks being exposed to new technologies and learning and figuring out ways to apply. So if you think of something like precision agriculture, we kind of think about that as pretty standard in a lot of farming environments. It's taken us 20 years to kind of get to that stage. And you can consider that temporal aspect of new technology introduction as well. I think also, and I'd have to look into the data a bit more, how are these technologies being used by farm operators like for their own use versus like drone as service, which I know is a different type of business model, and how that gets figured into USDA data, I would have to look into more clearly or closely. Thank you.
I really like that you brought in the visual of the U.S. food dollar. I think that was extremely powerful. I'm curious from your perspective, as you think about food retailers, CPG companies, how are they relating to these agricultural technologies to mitigate their own risk? What are they valuing? How are they seeing kind of these business opportunities? I think we've seen a lot of hype around carbon markets. I think we've seen some disillusion with like the dissipation of the Partnership for Climate Smart Commodities program. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Great question. And I actually have colleagues here who work really closely with some of our partners in the large food and bev companies. So they would be better able to speak to this. But one of the trends I've observed is that large-scale food and bev, I think PepsiCo has been really kind of vocal about looking back into their supply chain and really thinking about those integrated operations and pushing for regenerative practices and such that they really want to see upheld throughout their supply chain. So I think that is a trend that not just looking forward to the consumer, but these companies actually looking back and saying we have to be really close partners with our farmers, because also they don't have to just participate in our value chain. They can have other options. And so how do we do right by them in terms of really cultivating that strong partnership? So that's just one example that comes to mind.
Hey, just following up on the food dollar question, because I love that slide also, and it was fascinating. If I recall correctly, 34.9% of the food dollar was food services. I'm not really sure what that is. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, and I appreciate your question, and I actually looked into that because I thought that caught my eye as well. It really has to do with folks who are, some of the calculation in that is food at home and food away. So food service in terms of going and getting food from outside of your home. And they observed an uptick, especially in folks having the kind of convenience food with dual income families and such. A lot more of the food dollar is spent outside of the home than in.
Thanks, Amanda. So you mentioned bundles. I think you called them AgTech innovation bundles. Could you elaborate and paint a picture of exactly what those could be and entail?
Great. So I think we often think about these AgTech options in isolation. So we heard John talk about pesticide and biologics, and then we had the example of robotics and drones and such. And there are opportunities, I think, to think about, okay, if you're a farm of this size in this market, what combination of those things are best for your business opportunity? And farmers are doing that, right? They're combining things very creatively, but they're having to figure that out on their own instead of that being kind of presented and tested with them so that we understand return on investment, not just at the individual technology or innovation option, but return on investment for the suite of options that we have.
All right, I think we are at time.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Amanda.